This Flutter app has 3 text input fields that check the validity of our inputs. The first one checks if the username we enter is valid. The second one checks if the password we enter is valid. And the third one checks if the email we enter is valid. Let me show you how to validate text inputs like these using the TextFormField widget in Flutter. We start off with a blank app. Our app has nothing in it except a blank scaffold. So I'll go ahead and minimize this so that we have more space to see our code. The first thing we'll do is define the general layout of our app, which will be a column in which we will have our page title as well as our input fields. Let's save and rebuild to see what our app looks like. Save, rebuild. And here is our app. You can see that it is not occupying the full horizontal extent of this window. And that is because when we add in the text form fields, they are going to take up all the space they can. And so our app will now fill this window nicely. Let's now move on to adding our first text form field, which is the username text form field. We'll add our text form field right underneath this sized box. First, let's add some decoration to it. And here we're going to define a hint for the user to know what to put into this text form field, as well as a rounded border and a fill color. Also, since this is a username text form field, we shall put in a prefix @. Let's save and see what our text form field looks like so far. So save and reload. And here is our text form field. If we click on it, we can see that we get our @ prefix, and we can now go ahead and put in whatever we like. The next thing will be to work on validation for this text form field. So inside the text form field here, first let's add some commas for formatting. Now inside this text form field, we'll start by defining the auto validate mode property. We want this to validate each time a user edits the input. So we'll set the auto validate mode to always. Now that we have that set, we move on to the actual validator. The validator property takes a function. And this value here is whatever is in the text form field at the time. For this username text form field, I want us to check 2 things. The first is to check whether the field is empty so that we prompt the user to enter a username. And the second is to check whether the username that has been input is too long. You can add validators for other parameters if you like, but these 2 are the ones we're going to work with in this tutorial. We're going to create these functions at the top outside our build function. So we'll do that here. The first will be a function to check whether the input field is empty. So this function returns a boolean, and let's call it isEmpty because it checks whether the field is empty. This function takes an input and will check if the length of this input is equal to 0. If it is, we'll return true. If it's not equal to 0, that means there is input inside our text form field, then it will return false, meaning it is not empty. Let's create the second function for checking if the input is too long. We'll call it isTooLong. And we'll set this up in such a way that if the characters are more than 20, then this will return true, meaning that the input is too long. Otherwise, it will return false. Now that we have the 2 functions that we will use to validate our input, let's use them inside the text form field. The first thing we'll check is if the input is empty. And if it is, we want to return a string that tells the user enter a username. But if that is not the case, meaning we actually have input in our field, we want to check if the input is too long. And if it is too long, we want to tell the user that the username is too long. But if that is not the case, meaning we are satisfied with the input, we want to return null. That is, we have no error message for the user. So let's put a comma for formatting here, save our code, and reload to see our app. And here is our rebuilt app. You see we have this error message that says enter a username because our field is blank. So if we put in some text, we see that our error message disappears and the border is blue, meaning our input is fine. But if we keep adding characters and exceed the 20 character limit, we see that we have this warning that this username is too long. Are you enjoying this video so far? Consider liking it and subscribing to this channel. Let's go on. Let's move on to the text form field for creating a password. We'll add that text form field right below this one, but first a sized box for spacing. Since these two text form fields are the same, we'll simply copy and paste this text form field we've already created and then change the username values to password values and then work on the validation for the password. So we copy this and paste it here. For the password, we will check two things. One, we will check if the field is empty, of course, and if it is, we prompt the user to enter or create a password. And second, we are going to check if the password is too short. Those are the two parameters we'll work with here, but you can add more if you'd like. We're going to use this Boolean function that we already created here to check if the field is empty, but we're going to add another one that checks if the input is too short. And for this function, we'll set the character limit to a minimum of 8. So if the input is less than 8 characters long, we want to return true, otherwise we return false, that in fact it is not too short. Now that we have our function, let's apply it inside our text form field, inside the validator property. So first we check if the field is empty. And here we want to prompt the user to enter a password. And if it is not empty, we want to check the length to make sure it is not too short. If it is too short, we want to let the user know that the password is too short. But if that is also not the case, then we want to return null, meaning we have no error message for our user. So let's save and rebuild our app. Now we have our field for the password as well. Now if we have nothing inside our field, we can see this error message that we need to enter a password. And if we type in some characters that are less than 8 in number, we see that we have this password is too short warning. But if we keep adding characters and get to the minimum of 8 characters, we see that now we have no error message. Now let's move on to our last text form field, which is the email text form field. And we'll add that right below this password text form field, of course with a sized box for spacing first. And rather than type in the text form field code afresh, we'll simply copy this text form field code here and make the necessary changes. So copy that and paste it here. Now to check the validity of our email, I'd like us to use a package from the pub.dev website, which is the official site for getting Flutter packages. So let's go to pub.dev, and inside this website, let's search for email validator. And this result here is the one we're going to use. So let's click on it. We can see that it scores 140 on pub points, which is the maximum. That means this is an excellent package to use in our app. Also, we can see that it is a really popular package, so that gives us confidence that this is a good package to use. There's two ways we can get this package. The first is by copying this line into our pubspec.yaml file and then running flutter pub-get in order to get this package. The second is through our terminal, through a Flutter command, which is flutter pub add. So let me show you the terminal method. So back in our editor, let's go to this menu, view terminal. And inside our terminal, we type in the command flutter pub add email underscore validator, which is the name of the package. Hit enter. And so our package gets fetched from within the editor, and we see that pub-get runs automatically. And so if we check our pubspec.yaml file, let's minimize this terminal window. If we go to our dependencies section, you can see that email validator has been added as one of the dependencies. So now that we have this dependency inside our project, we can use it to validate our email input. So the first thing is to import it. So inside this validator property, the first thing we'll do is check if the field is empty. If it is, we want to prompt the user to enter an email. But if it isn't empty, meaning we have some input, we want to check if the email is valid. Now for this, we'll create a Boolean function using our package, and we will call this isValidEmail. And for this, we'll use the email validator from the package we just installed. And if indeed it gets validated, we want to return true. Otherwise, we will return false. So let's use this new function inside our validator. If indeed it is valid, we want to return null. That means no error message for the user. Otherwise, we want to ask them to enter a valid email. Let's save our code and rebuild our app. And now we have the text form field for email. If we have no input inside this field, we see we have the enter your email prompt. If we go ahead and type in some characters, we see that the prompt changes to enter a valid email. So if we add an @, some characters, a period, and then some more characters, now this qualifies as a valid email. So this is how you do text input validation in Flutter using the text form field. If you have any questions, post them in the comments below and I will help you out. If you have any other comments, drop them in the comment section as well. And if you have found value in this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to this channel with the notifications turned on so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. This has been the Flutter Coach, and I will see you in the next one.